Welcome everybody to episode 2, season 1 of Power Hour podcast. My name is Jeff Crudington, I'm a Rec, and today we are very, very lucky to be joined by Will Aitken, who is email extraordinaire, top salesperson. He works at Lavender, which is everything to do with emails, and he's here to talk to us about email BD in recruitment. The reason for the podcast is we're really trying to help recruiters to level up, and part of that is actually persuading them to adopt these kinds of tactics, because everyone knows you should email, but number one, it's like, how do we email? And then number two, it's, why should I do it in this particular way? In this day and age, do you feel like there's any place for like bulk email automation?
Yes. This might be a bit contradictory to what I said before. I personally don't believe that spending 20 minutes writing a personalized email to every single person you reach out to is an effective use of your time, especially as a recruiter, because BD is not your only role. What I would recommend doing is probably all the things we mentioned here today: job ads with low applicants, someone leaving a company. These are things that more than one company is facing right now. So if you can try and bucket those people into similar observations, then what you can start to do is reduce the amount of work. So you could say, hey, I noticed that you just lost one of your senior recruiters. You could send that to 50 companies or 20 companies who've just lost that senior recruiter, right? So that's where I start to think scaling can be a thing. I would automate, but in a very smart way where you're still being as relevant as you can be, if you want to go down that path.
Welcome everybody to episode 2, season 1 of Power Hour podcast. My name is Jeff Crudington, I'm a Rec, and today we are very, very lucky to be joined by Will Aitken, who is email extraordinaire, top salesperson. He works at Lavender, which is everything to do with emails, and he's here to talk to us about email BD in recruitment. Did I miss anything? Was that good or not? What's kind of...
No, mate, you nailed it, Jeff. And I love the name of this podcast. Back when I was in recruitment, Power Hours, I made the entire team do one every single day. Yeah, and they hated me for it. So
yeah, especially at the moment, because obviously, the point of the podcast is to help recruiters level up. Especially at the moment, there's a lot more business development needed, right? Yeah. A lot of people have not done business development before, or at least will not done it for ages. Right. But the good news is that, there's a lot of sales enablement tools, Lavender being one of them, that will make that process a lot easier for people if they understand. So the idea is to invite thought leaders like yourself. I know you put out loads of, really funny content, which is really engaging. But as well as that, you really know this side of things. And for people that did not know this, you was a recruiter yourself until you escaped the industry and the country.
Well, in fairness, I was in Sydney, which every British person who travels to Sydney seems to become a recruiter. It's kind of like the cliche. But yeah, I'm really excited to chat about this because, that's saying if you knew then what you know now. Back then, I didn't know what I was doing, but I often think about ways that I would have done things differently back when I was in recruitment. Now knowing so much about outbound sales, cold emails, those types of things. So I'm hoping we can deliver some serious value here.
Well, I think definitely, and that's the reason why, I kind of handed you a little bit to, and plus, thank you very much for being so easy to deal with and, coming on quite easily. I thought it was going to be really bloody hard, but I know I handed you a little bit as well, but that is obviously, I know you love that.
Half is in the follow-up, so you did a good job there.
Yeah, thank you very much.
We'll touch on that in a bit.
Yes, that's definitely, because the follow-ups are such a difficult thing. So I think that if you wouldn't mind just getting straight into the nitty-gritty with it.
Yep.
So again, most people, all they use emails for is spec, which is fine, and we can definitely get to that. That's a great way. But if you were talking to somebody who's got sort of no idea how to approach people, candidates or clients, from an email perspective, from top to bottom, would you be able to lay that strategy out for us, please, Will?
Yeah, I could. Yeah, for sure. So I think about back when I started in recruitment, I got given my own 360 desk, and then I said, go get some clients, go start filling some jobs, right? And I had no idea what I was doing. I wouldn't just jump straight into emails, because what you end up doing is sending all these generic ass emails out that no one's going to read. They're not that relevant. People get tons of these things. You hear about on LinkedIn from candidates. You hear about it from all these HR, talent acquisition folks and hiring managers. They're just getting hounded by recruiters. So these generic messages, they're just not landing, especially now when there's so many less jobs available now to try and fill, right? So I would probably slow down before I jump straight in. Because to me, a good cold email has a few things. There's number one is the formatting. So these are the things that the company I work for right now really helps with, Lavender. Short emails are best. You got to keep them under 75 words. You want to make sure that they're not really complex and long and bulky and they're mobile optimized. All those things really matter. But almost more important is the actual messaging itself. Here's why I'm reaching out to you. Here's why I think we might be able to help you. And if you haven't got any candidates or you don't have any jobs, then it's really hard to come up with a reason to reach out to someone.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time, what I would do is, if I was to go at this today, I'd probably just start picking up the phone. And I know we're talking about email today, but I'd start calling candidates.
Well, you are on LinkedIn. You're a top voice on cold calling, so
yeah, it's cold calling candidates is a little bit easier than cold calling hiring managers because they're just a little bit less rude and they think you might have something for them sometimes. But just talking to candidates, people who maybe have applied for a role in the past few months, maybe someone if you work for an agency, there might be a few candidates in the pool they haven't hit up recently. And what I'd be doing is asking them, all right, how are you going? What you're looking for? Try and understand what they're looking for in terms of a role or what they might be open to. But then a lot of the time, what you can do is actually ask them, hey, and have you been interviewing recently? How's that been going? And sometimes if you ask the right questions in the right way, you can sometimes get a little bit of a clue or a lead towards a company that might be hiring. When was the last time you interviewed? A couple of weeks back. Oh, where was that? How was that? And then you can find these companies that are hiring. Well, that then gives you a reason. You've now got a candidate who you can start speccing in if they're good. But you've also now got a reason to start reaching out to a company. Which is a little bit less generic than, hey, I saw you have a job ad out, because that's what most recruiting messages will look like. Most hiring managers, HR, TA teams will be getting emails from recruiters saying, hey, I saw you have an open job on LinkedIn, on Indeed, on Seek if you're in Australia. I can't even remember all the ones in the UK now. It's been so long. That's like a very generic message to say, hey, you've got an open job ad, might have a candidate for you, or we're an agency that helps with that. Let's have a chat. But if you can speak to a candidate and find out they've interviewed somewhere recently, well, that then gives you an opportunity to reach out to that company and say, hey, I was just chatting to a candidate. So they haven't had an interview recently with you. So it wasn't a fit. However, I might have another candidate for you. And then you're just using a slightly more tailored, less generic kind of observation to start your email, at which point you can then go into how you might be able to help them.
I'm with you.
That's where I'd start start getting leads.
I think that's a massive point that's overlooked, because it's kind of like, if you have not started your journey in the right path, then you're going down. You're going somewhere where you're not going to end up anywhere really good, basically. So I think it's highly targeted. I think, as you say, like really small messages, more like text messages. I think I've found work really much. I liked what you said there about you're gonna get everything you need off of a phone call, and it should be a tool in your arsenal. It should be a tool in your arsenal. I think one of the most effective ways that I use email is very, very similar to that, actually. So if, say, for instance, I look through my feed, I'm one of them losers who at night I'm like just scrolling through LinkedIn, mainly looking at videos of you and your handsome face and your very, very funny,
Jeff.
I'll notice if someone's got a new job, right? So the first thing I'll do is I'll say, right, that person's got a new job. Well, that means in this market that company are hiring, right? They are hiring. It might be a one-off hire, it might be whatever. Sometimes hires don't work out. They might need a replacement, whatever. And this is how I get a really, really high response rate. That person, right, whoever they are, I don't know who they are, but John Smith, who's just joined Hayes as an example, right?
Yeah.
I'll go to their hiring manager and I'll send that hiring manager a message saying John Smith. That'll be the subject. That fucking gets
really good.
That gets
good. Every time.
And there's no point messaging that person to say, oh, congratulations on your new hire. They know you don't care. They know you don't care. So it'd be like something like, right, I've got somebody who's very, very similar to this experience. Are you expanding a team? What are you trying to do? Are you trying to find plenty of these?
It's really good.
I'm quite lucky, really, because I'm in a position where I'm selling salespeople, recruitment consultants, salespeople, and most of the time, who doesn't want to add money to their?
They get it. It's if you've got someone good in sales and recruitment, even if they're not high opening, if they've got someone good, they won't pass them up on them. That's what I've, in my experience at least. Yeah. If they're good.
Well, that's another point that you made there. What are you actually messaging about? Is it of value that what's your approach? Why are you approaching that person? Are you doing it? KPI tells you to do it, or are you doing it because you're in your head, you think, I can help this person in this way? So
so to let's go on a little bit more on that, because to me, in sales, in the world of selling tech, there's kind of three main elements of a good cold email. Okay. I'd say maybe four, arguably. Number one is the reason that you've reached out to them specifically. This is like, I reached out to you because a very unique reason. This is why. This is what I saw that made me think that you might need what I do, right? Same thing applies to recruitment. So first of all, that's like a trigger, an observation that you can use in your emails. So you just gave me one there. Hey, I'm reaching out because I recently saw you brought in John Smith onto your team. That made me think that you might be looking for more recruiters of a similar caliber. A lot of folks right now are finding, while there are tons of recruiters available, not many of them have actually got the track record to prove that they're getting any good. Would you be curious to see someone who's really good, similar background to John? Let me know and we can have it set up a chat or something like that. Worth a chat, worth discussion. Would that be interesting to you? Would that be helpful? So that might be one email, but then you could look for other observations. So one observation for recruitment would be they've just hired someone. Now, obviously, John Smith's just left the agency as well, hasn't he? So what about them? Are they down a good recruiter now because John's not there? If they've only got 5 recruiters, then they're going to be like, that's 20% of their entire business gone, right? So you can reach out to them and use the same subject line, John Smith. Hey, saw that your recruiter recently left. A lot of folks right now are finding it's really hard to come across, qualified recruiters. They're getting lots of applicants to their jobs, but if they don't know anyone in the network who's as good as that, it can be a real, it could be up to 3 months before you get that kind of that gap filled and that revenue coming back in, which you lost through John. I've got a couple of candidates that might be worth looking at, similar kind of background to John, being in recruitment for 8 years. Would this be worth a chat? Is this interesting? Another observation, you could be talking to a candidate and you could find out that they interviewed somewhere but didn't take the job or didn't get the job. Well, then you can reach out and say, hey, I was just chatting to a candidate that you mentioned they interviewed you recently. They said they didn't get the role in the end because they didn't have it. I actually know someone who's a little bit more qualified than them. Would you be interested to have a chat with them? So you're using these like little observations to make your message really relevant rather than just sending like a generic email to everyone who you think might be hiring right now saying, hey, I've got a gun recruiter. Do you want to meet them? Yeah. That would be a very generic message. It's not going to get someone's attention. But if you can use just a little bit of relevance and observation, a little bit of personalization up front to say why it is that you think they might need your service, you're going to get a lot more attention, a lot more reads, a lot more opens, and a lot more replies from these companies. So I'd say that's probably the most important thing. And then the ability to like think in your mind, okay, if someone left, what's the challenge that creates? And the challenge is often empty seats, less revenue. That's probably the big one. Or if they've hired someone, maybe they're open to more people. They're trying to grow right now. If they don't grow at a fast enough rate, what happens, right? So you're just trying to get observation, challenge, solution. That might be a candidate. It might just be talking about yourself and how you help companies like them. And then a CTA, which is typically not, hey, do you want to jump on a call next week on Tuesday? It could be something like, is this interesting? Would that be helpful? Is this relevant? Because that's a really easy question to reply to. And what you really want is a reply at the end of the day.
So the best calls to actions are not asking people for time.
That is correct. We actually saw that asking for time reduces, it gets about 1/3 of the response as asking someone a kind of a close-ended question that will get them to respond. What you got to keep in mind is a lot of the time when people open an email, these people are getting hundreds of emails a day, hundreds. And we don't really recognize this a lot of the time as sellers and recruiters because we're just begging that people would email us sometimes, right? But these folks who are decision makers, hiring managers, TAs, HRs, they're getting hundreds of emails from recruiters all day long. So what they quickly want to do is they wouldn't possibly have time to open every single email they receive and read it and then reply to them, right? So what they do instead is basically scan through these emails, looking for signs that is this important or is it not? And quickly when they see, hey, when you see a subject line that says, looking for more recruiters for your team, looking for more developers, they know that's going to be an email from a recruiter. So they can hit delete and not feel bad about it because they're busy. They don't have time to read those emails. So that's why an email with your subject line, the one you gave earlier, John Smith, would get someone's attention. You could also just do really short ones like open role or low applicants, just something real short that doesn't really put up their defenses too much. But once they open the email, what they're actually going to do is going to read the first line. And then it's the data shows that they actually kind of read in a clockwise pattern and go straight to the bottom to see who it's from and what they want. Because often people will say what they want at the bottom of the email. And when you start saying stuff like, want to have a 30-minute coffee next week?
Yeah, no.
Immediately, then they're like, okay, no, don't have time for that. Go away. These are busy people. We can't be. So oftentimes it's just about getting them intrigued, getting them curious, get them to reply. once they've replied, it's actually so much easier than book that meeting, because you now know that what you've done is hit on a point, right? So making an email easier to reply to is much better than try and go for the hard sell of meet me or do this, or, you know, sign an agency agreement with me.
I think as well, you know, you've got to look at it. You're really, I mean, I think I've probably learned this from you, but you know, you spoke about this a lot, but you've got to put yourself in a position of receiving the email, you know. So we're under pressure as a recruitment industry in certain sectors for business development, because, you know, things are just not as strong as what they was last year, for example, right? But that's across the board, you know. That's not just because we're in recruitment. I mean, it's because it's across the board that it is a problem in recruitment, if that makes sense. Yeah. So, I mean, they're going to be under pressure, aren't they? They're going to be under pressure. They're going to have loads more to do in their calendar. They're going to have to, you know, focus more on, you know, winning business or keeping staff, or, you know, these sorts of things. So time is important, and it's, you know, to ask someone for half an hour, it's a bloody hard ask, isn't it? I think there's, you know, especially for a cold email, as you say, like, it's nice to just open up a conversation. I always go, personally, I always go email to phone call. Now, I always try and have email phone call. You know, that's kind of like my ladder. And obviously if they want to meet and whatnot. But I feel like a lot of stuff nowadays, what used to people say back in the day was like worst practices, seem to be best practices nowadays. Like before, like getting, so for instance, you probably remember sending out spec emails of candidates to, you know, loads and loads of clients.
I'd blast them out there. I'd get a good candidate, I'd send it to everyone, and I get like 2 replies from 800 emams because they weren't that good. But like, that was good, because there was still 2 jobs that I can then put on my thing, right?
For sure.
But these days, that's we'll make you touch on that. Sorry, go ahead.
No worries. So with the speculative emails, for instance, right? You used to get emails, but they used to be huge, right? It used to be, if you're not being extremely thorough, right, about your spec, then, you know, you're just not very good at your game. Basically, you need to know the ins and outs of everything. Now, I would say you'd get more response from saying, for instance, I've got a $1 million cybersecurity biller who lives in San Diego. Would you be interested in having this person joining your team? Have you got something that we can discuss for this guy? He's passive, but have you got something to say? That, or even like a little much more.
Yeah. That you could even do a little permission slap on that, is what they call it. So they call it permission slap. I don't know why. But you could go, hey, look, I'm working with this absolute, you know, weapon developer, 8 years experience, does I don't know, Python. I don't know the languages anymore. And then you could be like, would it be worth me sending over a bit more about them? You know? So then what you're going to do is get their interest, right? You're trying to build curiosity, because they've got 10, 20, 30 emails telling about the gun candidate out in San Diego. What you're doing is trying to get them go, oh, okay, hang on, this could be good. And if you can get them to reply and you send the spec over, now you've got a reason to actually follow up a little bit more as well. And then actually start a conversation. Hey, here's the full spec on them. This is what they do. Worth jumping on the phone, because now you've got the reply. The actual conversation has started. That's half the battle, getting that conversation, that back and forth going, because naturally they just want to be like, no, leave me alone. Got a million recruiters hitting me up. So if you can get the conversation, then everything else after that comes a lot easier.
Definitely. And I think as well is that they're invested, aren't they? Once they've replied once, they've invested in something now. You know, their time is worth, you know, money. So they've invested. Very true. It's kind of like, you know, it's their follow-up now. You know, if you don't do what you're supposed to do, it's for them to follow up, or just leave it, you know, but at least the pressure's off you a little bit, which, you know, I think that with business development, a lot of people are very, you know, scared of it, embarrassed about doing it. I feel like it's something where there's a lot of emotion involved in it, right? It's not robots. So, you know, a lot of people are scared of rejection. They're scared of like, I'm going to send this, what response am I going to get? But I know you're really keen on this, and I'm personally, it's the only way I deal with things, but I look to disqualify rather than to qualify. And I know that's something that you spoke about before. I think that it's a much better approach. And also what it does is, because I'm quite a sensitive person, Will, right? This is the truth. I'm very thick-skinned because I've been doing recruitment for years. But sometimes when people do chew me out, if I pick up the phone to them, it does hurt still. You know, you still get a little bit, you know, I'm not good enough. You know, even that happens very rarely now, because most of the people I speak to, I spoke to loads of times before, right? And then when I am doing cold outreach, like following your advice is extremely tailored, you know, and so people, and usually I've got a product that people want, which is that's such a key. Like right now, if you've not got a product that people want, don't just do something else. Just go and change, you know, go and find something more valuable, you know. So that's what I think. But sorry, I lost myself there a little bit. But
no, you're good.
Yeah, I think what I was getting at is that people are scared of the responses that they're going to get, and I think that, you know, the way you're sort of playing it out, it's kind of like, look, you know, I've got something of value, so if they don't want it, they don't want it. But you know, I've not wasted that person's time. You know, I've actually gone to them with something useful.
Yeah, I would say so as well. So I probably felt a lot more like that back when I was in recruitment as well. But moving from recruitment to sales, it's basically the name of the game, getting chewed out. You just get used to it, you get thick skinned, right? But by writing the email more focused on them than you, then if you do get rejected, then it's not really on you as well. And a lot of the time when these rejections happen, they're often just knee jerks because people are so fed up being reached out to recruiters. It's not actually a reflection of you. So it's very easy to take that personally, but realistically, it's not something personal to you. It's more about probably the other 100 recruiters who emailed them before your email came in, right? So I never take that stuff personally, but by framing the entire email, the reason that you're reaching out on them and their problems, then a lot of the time that you don't get as shot down, right? I think a lot of the problem that people have in both sales and recruitment is making it all about them. Yeah. So like, I'll give you an example. If I was selling Lavender, which I do, and I started reaching out to people saying, hi there, Jeff, I've got this solution. It's AI powered, helps you write better emails faster. Make sure that you're not sending any rubbish emails out the door. It's you know, we've got customers who are raving about us. It improves reply rates by 20%. Would you like a demo next week? Well, then what I've done is written that email all about me and my company, and no one really gives a crap, because if they did, they'd probably already be looking for it. They'd already be asking for a demo. They'd already be using the solution like it, probably, right? If I then flip that on its head and make the email and the outreach or the cold call even all about them, then what we do is we take the focus off us and put it on the customer, which is what people want. Yeah. So instead of saying, hey, I have a solution that does this, I could be like, hey, I couldn't help but notice that you've recently hired a bunch of sales reps. A lot of the time when folks bring on sales reps, it's really hard to understand if they're doing well or not in the first kind of couple of months and where they need the most coaching. This company, so now I'm talking about people like them rather than myself. This company, let's say Sendoso, uses Lavender for all of their new onboarded reps to see what areas of improvement, but also give them coaching without having to invest loads of time in one-on-one coaching and email reviews. Does this sound interesting or relevant to you? So in that entire email, all I've done is focused on them, something about them. They're hiring right now. They've brought in a bunch of SDRs. A challenge that comes with that is that a bunch of SDRs don't ramp, and therefore they're paying people to not make the money. And then what other people are doing to solve that? Sendoso are using Lavender to make sure they can coach them. I've only really kind of touched a little bit on my product, but more so in the frame of someone like them, right? Because if someone tells me, I got this example from someone, who was it? It was Josh Braun, who's another big sales trainer in the space. He was telling me a story. He walked into a running shoe shop. His wife went to Sephora or something to go buy some makeup, and he was like, you know, I don't know what I'm going to go look in Nike, let's say. So he went into the shoe shop, and if they had said to him, we've got the best shoes in sliced bread. We've got amazing shoelaces that tie themselves. We've got the comfiest shoes for running ever. Then what they would have done is he would have been like, no, I'm not interested. I'm just looking, you know? Instead, what someone did is walked up to him and said, looks like you're a runner based on that pair of shoes you're on. They made an observation about him. And they said, have you, I'm guessing you've already done I think it was like a running test to see how your feet go when you run. They're like, I'm guessing you've already done one of these. And he went, no, what's that? So by like making these assumptions and make it about them, you can actually then highlight challenges and get them interested and curious. But when you start talking about yourself, in that example, your shoes, how great they are, or in recruitment, how amazing this candidate you have is, or in software sales, how innovative and supercharged your product is, people immediately tune out. But when you start making it about them, challenges, and what people like them are doing to solve those challenges, you're actually talking their language. And if they relate to that challenge, then they're going to go, all right, hang on a second, how do you help with that? So you can actually get them to ask, and then that's your invitation to come in and say, okay, sounds like you might be facing that. Tell me more. How long has this job been open for? What's been wrong with the candidates you've been seeing so far? You know, why is this job open in the first place? Is this a backfill, or is this a new role? Or how many roles have you got across the team? Is that tied to a wider strategy? Is there a project? oh, have you thought about bringing contractors in? Have you got any contractors right now? So you can start to kind of like build out this kind of more of a case for why they would then actually need to use you and see the amazing candidates that I'm sure you have, right? Which is a much more compelling conversation than, hey, I've got a gun candidate. You want to see them? Because everyone's going to be saying that, and you want to be different.
I think that it's just, I mean, I'm so glad that you came on, because like, just like I feel like I'm learning on the spot as you go, you know. So like what you're talking about, observation, challenge, solution, call to action. That's kind of like,
that's it.
That's it. And then obviously you tailor that into each, you know, individual approach. And like what you're saying is, you know, about having a conversation is just a word that you use a lot. And again, like starting as you mean to go on, that's starting a conversation, isn't it, Will? That is starting a conversation. That is not just going, oh, look at me, I'll do this, and this, and this. And you're kind of like, all right, like if that was in real life.
If I cared, I would have asked. They didn't ask, right?
Yeah,
especially in cold outreach, right? They didn't, that's the biggest thing. They didn't ask, so shut up about yourself, right?
Yeah.
No one asked. And can you imagine someone walking up to you at a party and being like, imagine me walking up to a party and be like, yeah, so this shirt, I've had it for 5 years, get loads of compliments on it. It's 100% nylon, doesn't need ironing. You know, if I just started doing that, you'd be like, shut up. Didn't ask about your shirt. You know, if I walked up to you and said, hey, that's a nice polo, where'd you get that? You know, you get these, if you show interest of people and make it about them, then they often reciprocate in a much better way. Now, there is space to then maybe do a little bit more about you, but I would reserve that for follow-up emails. A lot of people make the mistake of putting everything they can say in their first email, which makes this long email that no one's ever going to read, no one's ever going to reply to. But you've actually got multiple opportunities to get in front of someone. In sales, in the world of sales, we call this a sequence or a cadence. So typically I'll reach out to someone 20 times across maybe a month or 2 months to try and get their attention, because I know one email is not going to cut it most of the time. So I might give them a call, and then I'm going to leave them a voicemail and say, hey, don't worry about calling me back. I'm going to send you an email. Then I might send them an email like the one I told you just now. Then I might connect with them on LinkedIn. Then I might like and comment a couple of their posts. Then I might send them another email saying, hey, not sure if you saw my first email. No, I wouldn't even say that, sorry. Hey, reaching out because same thing I said in the first email, couldn't help but notice that you've had this job open. It's got 400 applicants. I'm willing to bet a bunch of those aren't qualified. A lot of folks are finding that their TA and HR team don't know what a good candidate looks like. They're working with us because we know what a good candidate looks like for a JavaScript developer, let's say. So we did that instead, and then we can go, and then we can give a little bit more context on how we help. I've been running this space for 3 years, and I've met a bunch of candidates. So I've got a bunch of folks who are actually kind of passively looking for work and aren't applying for jobs. Would you be curious enough to check any of those out? And then we can do another follow-up on the phone. We can send them a LinkedIn message. So we start to do these things where we start to paint a bigger picture as the time goes on. What a lot of folks do is send this massive long email about all the things and ways they can help in their first email. And then all they've got left to follow up with is like, did you see my last email? Did you have any thoughts on what I sent you? And that's just annoying. No, I didn't have time to watch it because your first email was 300 words long, and I don't have time to read that, because even in my role today, where I am still an individual contributor, I get tons of cold emails. And the second I see something long, I'm like, that's a sales email. I don't have time to read it. I do read them because it's what I do, and I can sometimes use that for content, or I give them some feedback, and I've got time for that still. But my COO, me and him go on a half an hour one-on-one. By the end of it, he's got 50 new cold emails in his inbox. It's mental. He doesn't have time to read and give people replies to all of those. So he just goes through and deletes them really quickly. So when you keep them short, concise, and about the person you're writing to, that's the winning formula.
Thank you very much for that, Will. And again, like the reason for the podcast is we're really trying to help recruiters to level up, and part of that is actually persuading them to adopt these kinds of tactics. Because everyone knows you should email, but number one, it's like, how do we email? And then number two, it's why should I do it in this particular way? And I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's like you look at it from their perspective. In half an hour, this guy's getting 50 emails, which I know that obviously tons and tons of data, and this is sort of touching a little bit on what I said earlier on about sometimes you can feel a bit rejected if you don't get a reply, right? So do you know what the actual average open rate is for email?
Yeah, I can tell you what kind of an average open rate is for Lavender. I mean, it depends on a couple of variables, right? So I can tell you that the average open rate for, I think, a 2-word subject line is like 50%. But if you get a 5-word subject line, it's like 20%. So these are like some of the data points where we start to help people, because long subject lines often are salesy. They're trying to sell, they're doing too much, and they are obviously recruiter or sales emails. So yeah, the average open rate across sales in general is probably around 30%. There are a few variables that come into that as well, like the length of the subject line, if the email's even getting delivered to the primary inbox, because it can go to spam as well, which is a nightmare, because then no one's going to see your email, no matter, even if it's great, So that's another topic entirely.
So that does, that was a question I was going to ask you. Like, how do you avoid that spam box? Because that's like, you're throwing something into the no return kind of thing.
Into the void.
Yeah.
To be honest, the biggest problem with spam inboxes is that you can sometimes, there's a few elements of it. So there's things that you can control, which are generally keeping links, images, spam trigger words out of the body of your email. When you start including attachments, like resumes, for example, if you're sending cold resumes, you're going to be torching your deliverability by doing that, which is another reason why you might not want to float in a cold resume, because what these email clients like Outlook and Gmail are trying to do is look for risks and stop them from getting into people's inboxes. An image could contain anything. It could be pornographic, they've got no way to screen for that. So the second you start including images in your email, and that includes your email signature, these inbox are going to be like, let's put them in the spam and hide the image as well. Because when you go in your spam folder, you'll see all the images are all blurred out. They're all like, do you trust the sender? And if you get the trust, then you can see the images. Links could be linking to anything, right? It does depend on where the link links to. So if you link to a good domain like LinkedIn, it's much more likely to go delivered. If you link to something like Google Drive, again, that could be anything. So they're gonna block that. Spam trigger words. So those are things like saying like work from home, 10x your income while new career, meet local singles like you. Little things like those. There's a big list of them on HubSpot, which is a really good place to look. Our tool also helps flag them if you write them in your email. It says, don't use that word because that can send you to spam. Okay. However, one of the biggest things, and this is a little bit outside of the individual contributor's control, is that every domain in emails, so that's the bit that goes, will.aitken@lavender.ai, that lavender.ai domain has a reputation. And it's often scored individually by all these different email clients like Gmail and Outlook and whatnot. Now you can actually break and lower your reputation of that domain, kind of like a credit score, by doing a few things. And one of the big ones is sending too many emails, because it would imply that domain is now spamming people. Right. So when you start sending more than 100 emails a day, well, it kind of says, okay, this person's abusing their email address. So let's make sure we don't put any more of their emails in the inbox. So that's again, if you're sending too many emails, if you're not spacing them out, if you're sending 100 emails in a minute, it's going to flag you. It's going to know that's not human behavior, and therefore it's probably a promotional email, and therefore it goes to spam inbox. So the main ones I would say are keep images and attachments and links out of your emails. Avoid using these spam trigger words. Avoid sending too many emails in a short period of time, as in if you send 100 emails in 5 minutes, you're going to get flagged. Avoid sending a high volume of emails. I would try to not go above probably 75 emails a day. So this is this is like a case study for why you want to send good emails rather than just blasting everyone. Yeah. Because if you ruin your domain reputation, it's like a hole you have to climb out with. You're almost better off starting a new website because you've torched your domain. So that's the one that I see a lot of people get wrong.
So actually, automation and bulk messaging is detrimental, because when you want to actually send a proper email to somebody, it could just land in their spam, and that could be a client, couldn't it? That could be someone you're already dealing with.
Yeah, I mean, normally if someone's replied to you in the past, then that generally will give you the tick. It will whitelist you. So if someone's already been responded to you in the past, either from that company or that person individually, then you're much more likely to land in their inbox. So that's less of a concern. But yeah, for net new emails, that's going to be a challenge that you're going to have to overcome if you've been absolutely spamming people with generic emails. And one thing that really does it wrong, one thing that can really get you in trouble is if your email is often on when you get an email, you can report that email as spam. That's the worst button that someone could hit. If they report your email as spam, it's bad news for you, because that's sort of human saying, this shouldn't be in the inbox. And then that email provider will know in the future, right? And the reason people hit those often is because of really bad messages, right? So I don't like to hit that button, because I believe people can get better and whatnot. But things that make me want to hit that button are like these nudging, bumping follow-ups. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when
So
someone sends me an
annoying.
email and then I get like Will, you didn't come back to my last email. Have any thoughts? Or bubbling this to the top of your inbox, or like circling back on my last message. I see that and I'm like, just go away. Now you're annoying me. Right? When you start doing meaningless follow-ups like that, that's why I think like, don't put everything in your first email. Use like each pain point or solution you have as a reason to follow up, rather than being like thoughts bumps, because that stuff is exactly what gets people reported as spam, because it's so irritating. Happens a lot to me on LinkedIn as well. I get a message. I got one like yesterday. Someone's followed me 8 times, and it's not even relevant to what I just don't have time to respond to every message I get. Right. But at this point, I got one like from him, and it was just like, Will, it was like really like it was kind of almost kind of guilt trippy. You know what I mean? It was like, I assume that you don't like making more money. I'm like, no, mate, I'm busy, and I don't.
I'm trying to make money.
I'm busy. I'm busy actually making money.
Yeah.
And your outsourced sales business development thing is not of interest to me. And I'm not going to respond to every email message I get, because LinkedIn, especially, although I'm not like a senior person, I've got a following there, so I do get a lot of emails. And if one is blatantly automated, I'm just not going to find time to reply to it. And it's very obvious to me when one is automated, because it's got clues. It's like, hey, Will, I see that you're the social at Lavender, and then it brings the emoji in. So I know it's been merge tagged, because it's like got the clue in there. Or I'm seeing recently a lot of AI generated emails, and I can recognize AI text from a mile away now. It's like, if you use ChatGPT to write your emails, it's got like kind of like condescending tone to it. And it's like overly polite, you know, like I hope this finds you well.
Killer.
Yeah, that's nice, but really it's a bit insincere, because they got 100 other emails that say that people hope they're well. No one cares. Get to the point, you know? And I know it sounds a little bit rude, and there are definitely different cultures where saying, how are you? And I hope this finds you well, and I hope you and your family are safe. Maybe depending on where in the world you are, that might apply. But I tell you, in the UK, North America, and Australia, people are like, all right, what's this about? Get to the point. So when I see that, I'm just like, come on. You're wasting your very first thing they're going to read is like the same thing they read in the last email. What's the reason you're reaching out? What have you seen that makes you think you can help me? Like that first line is so important. But yeah, anyway, so don't send rubbish emails, because people report them as spam, and then you're going to have an even harder time getting any success from it.
And the thing is that if someone's sending you 8 follow-up messages and they're all kind of like, hi, Will, did you see my last message? Or just bumping this back to the top of your inbox, or circling back here. It's like, all right, this is really shit. But in general, you know for a certain that was part of a sequence, and that's, you know, that's probably a robot that's sending you that. If not, then I mean, it's like one of them things you can't think of nothing to say. So that's why you say that, isn't it? Really?
Yeah.
You know?
And if your first email didn't get replied to, try something new, you know? So like you can change things in your follow-up emails, right? So my first email I've got, let's say I'm going to try to send a 50-word email that hits on an observation about them, like we said before, a problem that I think they might be facing, and my solution. I can rotate those things in and out now. I could notice something else about them. So maybe the first email is like, I saw you recently brought on John Smith. My second email could be, looks like you've got this job open right now. So then I can start using different observations, and I can start highlighting other challenges, and I can start highlighting other solutions that I could help them with, right? So you can switch out the pain points that you touch on. And there are plenty of them that in recruitment, especially, like, let's just think of a couple of pain points right now. Like, what's the reason someone might need to use a recruiter?
There's a talent shortage in their specific industry.
Talent shortage? All right, what's another reason?
That maybe their brand isn't great, and they they're having problems attracting people. That's another reason. And maybe they've just lost somebody and they're too busy to be able to try and advertise and find somebody. Maybe their internal team's not performing in the same way as what they have done previously. Maybe they've just promoted somebody and they need somebody to fill that gap. You know, there's 100 reasons. Maybe they've got a new project they've just won. They need someone. All that sort of stuff was permanent, but and then anything project-based would be contractors. Contractors are even harder to find.
Yeah, if you don't find someone, this project's going to be delayed, and your boss is going to be knocking your door saying, why have you not started this yet? We need to get this initiative done this year. It's a Q4 priority. Yeah, so there's a million different challenges you can hit on. So like, just switch those up, right? But make sure they tie to the observation, right? So like you said, their internal team might not be performing. Well, if you can go on there, if you on LinkedIn, especially if you look at the jobs, you can see when the job's got really low numbers of applicants, right? So that can lead you to say, hey, recently spotted that you've got here's one for you. Software sales specialist, Trilogy remote, $100,000 a year US. How many applicants has it got? It's posted 2 days ago and it's got 15 applicants. That's a shocking number of applicants, for this market, and it's remote. Like that tells me that probably I would say 14 of those applicants that wouldn't even stand a chance getting that job, right? So that could be a reason to reach out to someone and say, hey, I happen to notice you had a job ad out, right? So that's a pretty generic observation. And the applications were pretty low. A lot of folks are finding their internal teams just aren't sourcing enough applicants for them to look at.
Yeah.
Would you be curious to check out some more qualified candidates that meet all the requirements that the job ad had, right? So then you're tying observations to challenges in a thoughtful way. You're showing you've got a bit about you, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for definitely.
Like rather than, hey, got an open job, I have people who might be a fit, that's a bit more like anyone could send the email, whereas when you showcase some expertise and experience in your email, then you're much more likely to get the respect and attention.
I think that's a key point. If you can, I think everything that you do, every time you're reaching out, you should be showing, or you should be trying to show, you should be demonstrating your capabilities and your abilities and your knowledge in that area, because then you're showing that you're valuable. So like going back to that job ad, say for instance, if you look at that job ad and you think 100 grand, they're just not going to get it, tell them that. Just say, listen, I don't know if you know this, but you've advertised a job for 100 grand. You've probably got 14 people that have got no experience in it whatsoever. And you know why that is? Because everyone paying 140. Would you be interested in actually finding somebody who can do this job or not? Obviously not that. Well, maybe that, but
yeah, I mean, that might be a bit, that's a good point right there, right? Especially when you can but you got to be careful not to educate people, because sometimes I find, especially salespeople, they try and act like they know a little bit more than their customers.
Yeah.
And if you're selling to doctors, you don't know more than your customers. You're just a dodgy sales rep with a medical device. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's why I like to use a little bit more of a curious tone. Hey, it looks like that's like a label. Chris Voss calls it that. Did a good book on Never Split the Difference.
That's a quality.
That might be a challenge. Using little things like that often keeps you a little bit less, puts their walls down a little bit, because otherwise they're going to be resistant to it. But I do like what you're saying there, right? But you could also heck in the follow-ups, you could be like, hey, if I followed up on the email, I could even say something like, hey there, again, notice that your job's kind of not gaining the applicants since the last reached out. One thing I noticed is that the salaries in the job title there, we've actually got a resource that shows, average salaries for someone of a senior software sales specialist position. Do you want to check that out? Or check that out here, because it's a follow-up email. You can actually start including attachments. It's generally the first email you want to keep all that stuff out of. So you start actually sharing helpful resources that are going to make, if you give me something that's helpful to me, I will naturally want to reciprocate. So when you start giving people value for nothing and expecting nothing in return, you actually start to then get some more people going, oh, well, that was actually really helpful. Thank you. Yeah, I'd love to check that out. Oftentimes what I think you can do in those cases is share a third-party piece of content. So a lot of people in software sales, especially, they go, oh, we have a white paper on how to write incredible proposals, but it's actually being created by a marketing team. And it's kind of biased and it's full of ads for their product, But when you can say, hey, there's actually this awesome resource from a company or a media company called this, and it's not made by your company, you actually start to look a little more credible and unbiased, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So you don't have to actually go and create these assets. You could find a really good salary resource and offer and send it to people and be like, hey, noticed you're hiring a software sales specialist. I've actually got this report from Gartner, which talks about average sales OTE and comp in North America. Here it is. Check it out. PS, do you have any thoughts on my last note? And then you're doing a little bit more than just bubbling this to the top of your inbox. You're actually giving them stuff. And I think one of the almost overlooked human emotions in time in sales in general is naturally when you do something nice for someone, they feel an inclination to do something nice back for you. So that's why whenever someone says stuff like, thank you, or yeah, we'd like to move forward, that's actually often a time to opportunity to go, oh, no worries, you're welcome, let's do that. I'm curious, would you happen to know anyone who's a bit like you who might also be looking for applicants, candidates? That's where you might ask something in return, right? Even if you don't ask, they often offer something back to you. someone walks up to the street and says something nice to me, I feel an inclination to say something nice back, right? It's just it's almost human nature. So when you start doing nice things and giving people stuff like resources that help them do their job, they're much more likely to reciprocate, and you stand out from the crew of people who are hitting them with thoughts, bubbling this up, checking in, oh God, touching base.
They're frustrating, aren't they? They are frustrating, you know, for me on the other end of them. And again, like we're like a tiny company, but my title is CEO, and it's all we get. It's all I get. I mean, it's just like I've got another email now for LinkedIn. I just use that. I don't ever look at it because it's just like I can't actually see what I need to see. You know, interview follow-ups or whatever. You know, so yeah. I mean, I'm probably one of the worst people to ever email, because that unless you've actually got my actual physical email, just my real one, it's just going into that, you know, my inbox is a whole domain, you know, is at my trash box. Yeah, I can find. So look, we've touched on it already, but you know, in this day and age, do you feel like there's any place for like bulk email automation?
Yes. So this might be a bit contradictory to what I said before, but I personally don't believe that spending 20 minutes writing a personalized email to every single person you reach out to is an effective use of your time, especially as a recruiter, because BD is not your only role.
Yeah.
I don't even think that's worthwhile for a salesperson whose entire job is to just book meetings, like an SDR or a BDR. What I would recommend doing is probably all the things we mentioned here today: job ads with low applicants, someone leaving a company. These are things that more than one company is facing right now. You're using these observations, but I'm certain there's a lot of companies who have just lost a senior recruiter.
Yeah.
So if you can try and bucket those people into similar observations, then what you can start to do is reduce the amount of work. So you could say, hey, I noticed that you just lost one of your senior recruiters. You could send that to 50 companies or 20 companies who've just lost their senior recruiter, right? So that's where I start to think scaling can be a thing, where you can start to almost, in my mind, I'd have sequences for each of the main observations that I look for. Low job applicants. Okay, they've got low job applicants. I'm going to put that person in that bucket. And then I'm going to have 30 people being sequenced for that observation and the challenges that come with that, right? So I think that's probably the place where I'd be using a bit of automation. But yeah, because of the domain risks, because of the amount of mental load there is on people and their inboxes are so busy right now, I would always make sure that if you're doing that, you're doing the work upfront to make sure that you're segmenting those lists appropriately. The second you start sending really generic stuff to everyone, or the same thing to a bunch of people, like loads of people, you're going to start to become less relevant and less likely to get their attention, less likely to get reply. And the only people who are going to respond to that are the very small percentage of the market who might actually be open to, having a new recruiter. And those people aren't always the best jobs to have. Mm-hmm. Like, I remember I would send out these emails back in 2018 when times were good, and they would be like, I'm a recruiter that specializes in hiring salespeople or data scientists, whatever it may be. And I'd send that to like 500 people and I'd get like 2 responses. But those 2 responses, the jobs, they were replying to everyone. They let every recruiter work every single one of their jobs. So then I'd start working this job requirement and I'd find out I'm competing with 10 other agencies who have already burned every candidate that's even slightly qualified for that role that I don't already know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
So everyone's hearing about this job. That's not the kind of job I want. I want jobs that are almost a little bit more exclusive to me. Maybe I'm competing with one other agency, or maybe I'm the only agency on this role because I've stood out in such a way. So when you start sending generic stuff out to everyone, you start to get the worst companies and the worst jobs and the worst clients, if you know what I mean. Like, sending generic emails will get you responses if you send enough of them, but those responses, what happens after that? There are often those jobs that have, like, I used to recruit for a company, I can probably say this now, called Cognizant, which is like one of those big outsource, thingies that, like, they're in that world of like IBM, not IBM, that's probably a little bit upmarket for them, but Accenture and all that stuff, right? Can't even remember what they're called now. Like, they do outsourcing and all that stuff. They come and do projects for companies. They had like 10 agencies working on every single one of their jobs. I could never fill one because the hiring managers, when they got sent a resume, wouldn't even look at it, because they've got like 10 other agencies sending them resumes. They're like, what I'd do is I'll go to work this job, go find amazing candidates for it, send them in. They'd never even look at them. I don't want those jobs. I want the ones that are actually hard to get. Yeah. The ones people who are only really giving it to me and one other person they trust. And the only way you can get those folks is sometimes doing the extra work that other agencies won't do to try and BD them. So, yeah, that was a long-winded answer to say I would automate, but in a very smart way where you're still being as relevant as you can be if you are going to go down that path.
And I think, thank you for that. And I think as well that you're just a fountain of knowledge when it comes to this sort of stuff, and you're making such sense, because it's like, you know, we're trying to do, again, like, you know, the reason why we're doing this is we want to try and help recruiters, you know, and one of the most helpful things you can do to a recruiter is stop him from working shit jobs and shit candidates. And I know you shouldn't say that out loud, but you know, if you're working A jobs, like the last podcast was a guy called Sean Anderson, who's like, in our market, he's unbelievable at personal branding, getting inbound leads, you know, and he works he owns a company called Hot Zone Media. And they're really, really good at what they do. And that podcast was all about, you know, how you can get people to come to you, you know, and once they've come to you, the quality of conversations that you can have, right? And what you've just touched on there is by doing a quality tailored outreach to somebody, you're going to, in return, get quality back, you know, the jobs that you're not bottom feeding anymore. Right. And you know, then it's, you know yourself.
Bottom feeding is a great way to put it. You don't want to be a bottom feeder.
You don't. No.
And shit. I just, sorry, I thought it was saying maybe something to finish on, because I used to, as I said, when I used to work in recruitment at the very top of the school, I used to like my boss, I came from a sales background, went into recruitment, then went back to sales. So what I brought was a lot of energy to like pick up the phone, send like these emails. And my boss kind of said to me, and I'm actually he's still in Sydney, but I'm doing some training for his team because his agency's grown a lot since then. It's really weird. It's kind of come full circle. And he's bringing me in to do like some workshops with his team on how to build a personal brand, how to send good emails, how to make good cold calls and all that stuff. Now, I had someone at that agency that I butted heads with a lot. And it was because I was like, we've got to, right guys, it's power hour. It's 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Let's start pick up those phones. Let's go for it. Let's build some jobs. He's like, no, I've got too many jobs to work. But what he often found was those jobs he'd been working for like 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And he would never fill any roles. And oftentimes that's because he was so focused on trying to fill the roles he had that he was limiting his options. So he had 8 roles open. By prospecting, even when times are good, even when you have enough jobs to work, you give yourself the luxury of choice of where you're going to spend your time. And this happens in sales as well. It's why I talk about disqualification a lot. If I have a pipeline of 20 prospects, great. If I have 30 prospects that I can choose from, I can actually allocate my time to focus on the 20 that are most likely to close. Yeah. And the same thing happens in recruitment. If you have 50 jobs, that's a bit much, right? No one's going to be able to adequately work 50 jobs. But if you have more jobs to choose from, you can focus your attention on the ones that the hiring manager is the most receptive to, that are the most recently open, the ones that are most urgent roles to fill. And that gives you the choice. So even when times are good, you should always be prospecting, always be filling that pipe, always be giving yourself lots of options, because then you can be smart about the way that you manage your time when you actually go to head and try and fill those roles. Having those options gives you the superpower of being able to say, okay, well, I've got so many roles that I can just choose to work the ones I think are most likely to fill. And then boom, you're helping yourself out massively by doing that.
Well, thank you very, very much. That's a great point to end on. I really, really appreciate your time, Will. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. And thank you very much. I think that, you know, anyone that's listened to this podcast now has got like a real, you know, blueprint of what they can do to, you know, make their job better and be better at their job. And yeah. So.
Yeah. And I mean, we were a little bit all over the shop. You can always follow me, hit me up. My messages are somewhat open. Just don't send me anything automated and I will respond to you.
Lovely. All right. Thank you very much, Will.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Hello, and thank you for listening to Season 1, Episode 2 of Power Hour Podcast. We was joined by Will Aitken from Lavender AI, speaking all things email. Our recap is quite short and sweet, really. So Will went through very generously the structure that you could follow to send an email that would get somewhere in the region of a 50% open rate, which is huge. So the blueprint for that is observation, challenge, solution, call to action. And the example we spoke about was, I have just observed that you have got a live vacancy. The challenge that other people are finding are that they're being hit up by loads of responses, and those people are not relevant to that particular role. The solution to that is, I'm a niche recruiter. I have these individuals available. I've got a network of personal individuals that I've worked with time and time again, who could do this job for you. And the call to action would be something along the lines of, could I share more information? Or do you think that this is something that's worth us having a discussion about? Not to ask for time, not to ask for a coffee or a virtual coffee. Those things work less on a first approach. The other thing that we covered is specs. So obviously specs are a big part of some recruiters' lives, depending on, you know, what desk you're on. And, you know, historically, the idea of a spec is that you would send out, you know, the nuts and bolts of the candidate, you know, as much information as possible. You know, you want to be thorough, you want to have those processes. That's actually yielding much lower results than small, you know, sort of SMS style, like WhatsApp message style approaches now. So instead of doing it that way, an alternative way that you could use if you're not getting as many replies on the spec could be something along the lines of, you know, like I'd use my own desk as an example. Hi there, Paul. I've got $1 million cybersecurity biller who lives in New York. Currently in the market passively. Would you like to know more about them? Right, and in that way, I'm offering them the option to know more, so they can't sort of accuse me of, you know, not having the information. And I find that, you know, no matter how much information I put on these cold email approaches, people always come back with other questions anyway. And another subject that we covered was specs, because I know a lot of, depending on your desk, you know, a lot of recruiters will use speculative emails to, you know, gain interest in their candidates. So historically, I think best practice was always you throw as much information on a spec as possible. You let the client know, you know, the ins and outs of everything about this individual, and they can kind of like qualify or disqualify from that first email, and you know, get your response, you know, if they're interested. From what we were saying, it's going to be a much better approach if you do like a short, sweet kind of like WhatsApp message, really, or like an SMS message style email, saying something along the lines of, and I'd use it like as if I was going to be sending it. So I would probably say something along the lines of, I've got $1 million, I think what I used was $1 million cybersecurity biller in San Diego. You know, passively looking, would you like to know more about this individual? So maybe I would do that, you know, instead of doing this is the desk they're on, this is the kind of individuals that they're placing, these are the kinds of clients that they're looking at, this is the exact amount of billings they had last year, this is the one that they had the year before, this is what they want to do. You know, what we were saying is that, you know, people don't necessarily have the time or the inclination to read that, and once you get a response, then you know, you're in the game then, you know, and really the conversation is starting, which is the reason why you just send the email. So you know, that's a tactic that, you know, people can employ. Apart from that, I think we covered loads of different things about, you know, how you can avoid spam, and really interesting point that he made was that it's actually okay to automate your outbound emails and create a sequence, but that needs to be that you're scaling, you're just scaling the amount of people that you're contacting about something that's still very, very specific to them. So spray and pray, dead, don't happen anymore. You know, very, very little effect, if any, mainly more negative effect than positive effect. But, you know, if you're going to be sending 10 people the same email, but that email is relevant to 10 people, fill your boots. Thank you very, very much for listening. I hope that you found it helpful, and please look out for episode 3. And if you didn't listen to episode 1, we had Sean Anderson from Hoxo, who was talking everything LinkedIn, prospecting and personal branding. That was a cracking episode. So please watch that. Have a lovely day. Thank you.